Alrighty, it looks like we are now live. We are on my Twitter account, the Fireside Knicks YouTube, and in just a second, we will also be on the Fireside Knicks Instagram. As you guys can see, I am joined with a guest today, my good buddy Luca, aka Knickscast, a guy that I have frequently collaborated with in the past. Haven't gotten a chance to bring him on here, but now we finally made that happen, and that's what we're gonna have him on here today. Talk about just this playoff series against Atlanta, previewing Game One specifically. We've spent the past couple days talking about just the series in general. Yesterday, I spent some time talking about who needs to step up, but this is a good opportunity for us to actually preview Game One itself. Game One is, of course, going to be at MSG. And Knicks we're obviously very good at home this year, one of the best home teams in the league. So this is going to be a fun game. This is going to be a fun discussion to have. Luca, I kind of just want to pass it off to you, kind of let you rip off some initial thoughts on what you think about Game One, about this series, and just anything else you want to talk about regarding this to kind of kick things off here.
Yeah, initial thoughts in the series. First of all, good afternoon to everybody. Hope everybody's doing well as a Knicks fans and whoever is watching. Um, as an initial thoughts in the series, I know this is not the opponent that people had hoped for. People wanted the Raptors. I mean, the Sixers was also an option. The Magic was also an option, but the Knicks ended up getting the Hawks. Okay, fine. Convenience for me, the Hawks play about an hour 45 down south from me. So all I got to do is hop on 75, head to State Farm Arena. Precursor, I'd possibly going to game 4. Whatever, not the point. This is going to be an interesting matchup for the Knicks. The Hawks, ever since they've traded Trae Young, and ever since the middle of February, they've been one of the more surging hot teams in all of basketball, mainly because their defense. I mean, you think of guys like Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Onyeka Okongwu. You think of those guys forefronting their defense. They're going to be very aggressive with the Knicks, especially in the half court. I'm curious to see how they guard Jalen Brunson. I'm curious to see how they guard Josh Hart, especially that, in my personal opinion, I think Mike Brown's going to stick with the same starting 5. Do I like it? Not exactly, but I'm very curious to see how the Hawks guard that starting 5. Now, you saw in the last game, now obviously it doesn't mean it'll be the same way in the playoffs, that the Knicks ran a lot of two-man between Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. And that's what we've been kind of looking for the entire season, Dylan. The development of the two-man game, whether it was Towns passing the ball, Brunson passing the ball, pick and pops, pick and rolls. We saw that develop late in the season, and you really hope it starts to hit its stride in the playoffs because it could be as deadly as any other duo in the league. To see the Hawks guard that will be definitely fascinating, but I'm curious to see how the Knicks guard Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Here's another thing also as well. It was just revealed today. Jock Landale, the backup big for the Atlanta Hawks, is set to be out another 2 weeks. He's set to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. He currently, I don't know what injury he has, but he has been sidelined for a couple weeks now. And the Knicks currently have the advantage when it comes to the boards. They have Karl-Anthony Towns. They have Mitchell Robinson, who's one of the best rebounding bigs in the league, both offensively and defensively, more so offensively. And Josh Hart, who's a very strong rebounder as a guard, obviously plays bigger than his size. So I'm looking for the Knicks to kind of win the battle on the boards in addition to some other different areas. But this is definitely going to be a fascinating series. I'm not taking the Hawks lightly, but I'm also not overrating them. This was a good point brought up by Schwinn. You looked at the count, Schwinn of the Strickland, very good at what he does.
Yeah, no, he's awesome.
You look at the schedule that the Hawks had. Not that they're a bad team, obviously, or mediocre. Obviously, as I said, they're one of the more surging teams in the NBA. As they were a play-in team well before trading Trae Young. You look at some of those wins, and there's a lot of bad teams in there. In that little stretch run they had from about mid-February to the end of the season, you see Milwaukee, you see Dallas, you see Brooklyn. You see Memphis, you see Sacramento, and they beat teams like Orlando. Give them credit for that. They did lose to Cleveland. They also beat up on Cleveland, and they also lost to the Knicks. So I'm very curious to see where this team is at. This team has a decent amount of depth, but I'm anticipating. Did you give out your series prediction yet, Dylan?
Yeah, yesterday I said that the Knicks will win the series in 6. That's what I think will happen. I said that they'll probably end up having to close the series out on the road like they did last year against Detroit. But I think they'll get it done. I think I can see a world where they split the first 2 games at MSG. whether they win game one or they lose game one. I see a world where that happens, but I also can see them taking both games at MSG, but then splitting the road games and then losing again at the Garden, say game five, kind of like how the Philly series went. So um, that's what I personally think. I mean, I don't know if you think differently. I know some people have been saying that the Knicks will win in five, which I can easily also see. I think the Knicks are a much better team than Atlanta, but like you were just saying, we can't just like overlook Atlanta or just look at them as like a nobody opponent. Oh, Atlanta is a very solid team. They have good veterans. They have great young pieces. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jalen Johnson, both going to be MIP candidates. CJ McCollum's a great veteran to have around. Onyeka Okongwu has been on that team for a few years now. A very solid player. They have a deep squad. They shoot a lot of threes. They play quick, and they have some physical defenders as well, such as Dyson Daniels. So that's a very solid group right there. But the Knicks, as I just said, I think on paper are just much more talented. Um, obviously Brunson and Towns are, or when they can be at their best, can be a top duo in the entire NBA. And then OG Anunoby, one of the best perimeter defenders out there, while also being capable of averaging 18 points on great 3-point shooting. Josh Hart, as you said, the rebounding is very impactful. The guy that I said yesterday, though, I did a stream yesterday about who I think needs to step up the most. Some people were saying Cat, and I don't disagree with that. I think the player, though, is Mikal. I think out of all players, he's the guy that needs to step up the most, because if you can get a very solid version of him in this series, it'll be so much easier for New York to really just, dominate, because granted, they have a lot of good guard depth, such as Clarkson, Shamit. They've provided some good minutes instead of Bridges, but Bridges, we're expecting more out of Bridges, and we know Bridges is a very solid player when he's on. And if he's able to be at his best, then things can go much better for them. I personally think that. I don't know. Who do you think needs to step up the most, though? I want to hear what you got to say about that.
Yeah, I actually concur with your prediction, Dylan. I do have the Knicks winning this series in 6 as opposed to 5. You notice the last 2 years they've actually had opportunities to take the series at home. Both Detroit versus Detroit and both versus Philly. Obviously, that overtime game kind of played with their food a little bit. I kind of expect that with this series as well. I think the Hawks are going to give the Knicks a good test, and I think they're going to get the Knicks to stay on their toes a little bit. But going back to Jock Landale, he actually had an ankle injury on April 1st. So it was technically, yeah, it was 2 weeks ago exactly, almost, where he had that ankle injury. As I said, he's expected to
And
miss
that's pretty
4 weeks.
significant that you mentioned that, because the Knicks have a lot more size now than Atlanta. I think their centers are going to give them a lot of trouble. I think Towns and Mitch in particular are going to give the Hawks a ton of trouble. I think that's where the Hawks are going to struggle at the most.
I think that's a great point, Dylan. I also think, before I get into the player who I think needs to like prove the most, it's interesting because the Knicks are actually fully healthy heading into the playoffs. Obviously, knock on wood, it stays that way. Josh Hart's healthy. Towns is healthy. Mitch is healthy. Mitch is playing the best basketball we've ever seen ahead of free agency, nonetheless. So Clarkson's healthy. Shamit's healthy. Deuce is healthy. He got his legs under him against Charlotte in that last game. So the Knicks being fully healthy is something I'm really excited for. I'm curious. I mean, we saw what Mike Brown said. Essentially, the rotation is going to be 9-man. You're probably going to have Clarkson, Shamit, Deuce, and Mitchell come off the bench. We'll obviously maybe get into the rotation aspect in a little bit. But if I must agree, Dylan, I think the one guy that's going to have some pressure on him to perform, not like everybody else doesn't, is Mikal Bridges. Because to me, he started off the season really hot, and I think he went back to the 2025 version where he was very Jekyll and Hyde-ish. And I don't like Jekyll and Hyde players. I know he could play with aggressiveness and intensity, but it was just like it was very temperamental, Dylan. It was very temperamental. There would be times where it'd be like, okay, I'm going to show off my aggressiveness. I'm going to go to the cup. I'm going to shoot threes. And then there would be times where it's like, okay, no, today I'm going to actually avoid the rim and take stupid fadeaway mid-range jumpers like I'm DeMar DeRozan or Chris Paul. That's not his game. I mean, yes, that is a strength with his newfound jump over the last 2 years, but it should be shooting threes, driving to the cup. He has that aggression. He can beat defenders off the dribble and attack closeouts. But Mikal Bridges definitely, because he has a lot on the line. And if you guys didn't see essentially from James Edwards, it's probably a prediction, it's probably speculation, but he essentially said if the Knicks don't win this series or fail to make the finals, there could be wholesale changes. You know what? I think one of those wholesale changes could be moving on from Mikal Bridges, especially in the deal for Giannis. But obviously, we're not going to explore that. But we're not going to explore that yet, obviously. But at the end of the day, for me, it's Mikal Bridges. I just need to see some damn consistency. That's all I need at the end of the day.
I think I've said the word consistency on these streams like too many times to the point where if I feel like if I say the word consistency 3 times fast in front of my mirror, Mikal Bridges will show up in front of me out of nowhere, like
Yes.
it's some witchcraft. Anyways, though, yeah, no, I fully agree with everything you've been saying, especially because, look, I said the same thing about the wholesale changes as well, even before the report from James Edwards came out earlier. I agree. I mean, with the way that the expectations were this year, making the finals, going on a deep run, improving off of your Eastern Conference Finals appearance, we're not in that grateful stage anymore of just, oh, we're happy to be in the playoffs and still be competing. No, we're trying to win right now. The window is open right now for us to win, especially with the Pacers not being in our way this time. The last 2 times we've gotten knocked out of the playoffs was to the Pacers, and now they're not in our way. We don't got to worry about them. Obviously, they still got to worry about Boston and Detroit, but the Knicks beat both of those teams last year. Again, 2 different teams now this year, but still, they beat both of them last year. They've shown they can handle those teams, so they have to live up to the expectations. If they fall to Atlanta in the first round, oh my goodness, there's going to be a lot of changes, I think, forthcoming. I think it'll become more than just moving on from, say, Bridges and or Cat. I think you're looking at Mike Brown's job too if they lose in the first round. And granted, I thought Mike Brown did a pretty good job in the regular season. You know what I mean? I thought he did actually a pretty solid job. Mike Brown led this team to the third best offense, the seventh best defense. They're top 5 in net rating. They had several 30-point wins, even a few 40-plus point wins. The largest win in franchise history as well. Granted, it was over the Brooklyn Nets, but still, you can't just discredit that. They had a lot of good wins. They also had some pretty ugly losses, though. You look at the Mavericks game, for example, back in January. Just that entire 2-9 stretch you can even look at as well. Think about it. If they didn't go on that 2-9 stretch, you're looking at a team that might have had 60 wins. I'm being so serious, too. They were rolling at the start of the year and then just completely fell apart for about half a month. And then they, finally picked it back up again. But I felt like in March, we kind of saw a little bit of that inconsistency kind of run back a little bit. Granted, they went on a 7-game win streak, but if you actually watch the games and you look at the optics of it, they were ugly. They were some pretty ugly wins. I mean, they had to come back down 21 to a Golden State Warriors team with Brandon Podziemski as their best player. They went down 18 to Utah. They blew a big lead to the Pacers. They had some pretty ugly games thrown in there. And granted, wins are wins. You take them at the end of the day. You gotta just got to get through the regular season. But Luca, what I want to ask you really is, what's like the big key to these games in Atlanta? Like I personally think the big key is that they can't start the games off slow like they were starting off slow during the end of the regular season. I think they need to be able to stay hot from the get-go and really put some pressure on them early to kind of build momentum. What do you think about that?
Oh my God, yes, you have to start the games quick in Atlanta, especially Atlanta, because Atlanta's going to be loud. Obviously, MSG's a whole different aspect, but it's also it's going to be challenging to Mike Brown. And I know you mentioned Mike Brown; he's done a good job for the most part. If it wasn't for that losing streak, probably have at least 60 wins by now. You mentioned we obviously won the cup, and then in January we had the struggles, and then February started coming back a little bit, and then March, as you said, playing down to the competition against teams like the Pacers, the Jazz, the Nets, teams you have no business competing, no business playing down to, just like the Golden State Warriors, where they're basically missing their entire team. But it is about starting fast because you don't want to. And it's gonna if the Knicks kind of continue to play this lineup where they start slow and then it eventually costs them. That's going to remind me of 5 years ago when we had the Elfrid Payton, Reggie Bullock, Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, Nerlens Noel lineup, where the Knicks consistently started Elfrid Payton, regardless of how bad the net rating was or how bad the team would start. I think if you're Mike Brown, you have to be like, you have to have a quick trigger. Now, obviously, it doesn't have to be. It's not solely on Josh Hart for why the team starts bad, but we need to ask of Josh Hart, hey, bro, if you're open, shoot threes. Make them guard you. That is the most important thing you can do. Josh Hart against the Philadelphia 76ers 2 years ago was phenomenal. They essentially made Nick Nurse say, okay, I got to guard Josh Hart now because that's how excuse me, how he was not passing up open threes. He was making those open threes, and he was shooting. That was important because it's like, okay, we got to guard him now, which opens up everything else for Cat, for Brunson, for OG, and for Bridges. That's all. Is it going to be perfect? Is that a technical 5-out lineup? Not exactly, because as I said, Hart has those inconsistencies where he decides to shoot and he looks really good, or he passes up those open threes and annoys the crap out of all of us to the point where it's like, okay, now there has to be changes made. So I'm very curious to see how the Knicks leverage that, how they use Josh Hart. I mean, they obviously when he's on the floor, they mostly use him as a screener. When it comes to when they run the pick and roll with Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, there's very good dynamic. Same thing with Towns and Brunson. Even Josh Hart can run the screen and roll if he wants. Josh Hart shot 41% from three this year, which is a career high. But again, to me, it was also very sporadic. It doesn't mean that he's a great 3-point shooter, because you could tell the numbers are an outlier, because there would be games where Josh Hart would make multiple threes, and there was games where he just wouldn't make any threes at all, or just barely shoot. So again, Josh Hart, when it comes to 3-point shooting and actually shooting the three ball, you actually have to look for some sort of consistency. And I'm going to pull up some numbers on the starting lineup in a little bit, but Dylan, please.
Yeah, and as you were saying that stuff as well, somebody in the Instagram comments just mentioned this. He said, the key to the Knicks beating the Hawks in the first round is about being the better fourth quarter team in the series. Anyone can start hot, but what matters is how you finish. And I kind of want to hear what you guys say about that, because this is what I got to say before I pass that to you. I do agree that how you finish is what ultimately matters more, because I mean you could play the game ugly and you still end up winning, and in the playoffs what matters the most is you win the game. You have four wins to get. I mean, it doesn't really matter how you get them in the grand scheme of things. And it's interesting you point that person points that out too, because the Knicks were actually the best fourth quarter team in the league by net rating. Not even just the best fourth quarter team in the league, one of the best fourth quarter teams really in a very long time. We haven't really seen many teams have a such a what's the word I'm looking for? Like such a big net rating compared to their other quarters, ever. You know what I mean? Most teams really, they either play the same way or they play similar, or they sometimes even drop off in the fourth quarter. But the Knicks are one of those teams where they start the game like crap and then they just turn it up in the fourth quarter and in the second half. And granted, being a second half team is not necessarily a bad thing, because you got to finish the games. But I still believe starting the games are very important, because if you go down 15, 20 points early to, say, the Detroit Pistons, for example, you're not going to get away with that. You're not going to come back from that every single time. People are going to point to the Boston series last year and say, well, they came back down 20 points 2 times. Look, I know those comebacks were great and all, but let's be real. That was a big string of luck where a lot of good things, pretty much everything had to go right for us right there to make those comebacks happen. And we even saw in the Eastern Conference Finals that when you let your guard down, things fall apart, because look at game one. They let their guard down when they had a big lead late in the game, a game that should have been won. They ended up losing that game. And really, once that game was lost, I think you can even agree with me on this, that series was over. That series was done. Once they lost game one, that series was cooked. There was no way they were going to be able to come back, because all the momentum you had was gone, just completely wiped, erased. So, Luca, what I want to kind of tie back to is really your thoughts on that point about the fourth quarter, about how that's the most important thing, compared to starting games. What do you think about that?
It is very important. You want to, I mean, as we just mentioned, you want to start off on the right foot, but you want to finish on the right foot too. You don't want to play too much catch up where you're wasting energy throughout the entire series. I mean, you go back to, again, this was 5 years ago, to keep in mind, but a lot of those games that the Knicks played against the Hawks 5 years ago, as I said, disclaimer, 5 years ago, completely different roster. The only person or the only player that was on the Knicks roster 5 years ago and he was hurt was Mitchell Robinson, the only mainstay.
Shout out Big
Regardless,
Mitch, man. Shout out Big
yeah,
Mitch.
shout out Mitch. He's deserved this. They started a lot of those games slow. And it kind of burned their energy for the entire series trying to come back. But fourth quarters, it's huge. You go back to game 3 last year. Knicks were down 2-0 heading into Indiana in the conference finals. Karl Anthony Towns just pulls one out of his hat, completely goes off, and he carries the Knicks to a comeback win. And they're down 2-1 instead of being down 3-0. As you mentioned, the Celtics games. Game 1 and game 2. Personally, as you said, kind of a lot of luck there. But also, you want to look at game 4, talk about that battle. The Knicks were back and forth with the Celtics, back and forth, back and forth. Jason Tatum and Jalen Brunson are teeing off in the fourth quarter on each other. The Knicks ended up winning that one. That was a huge victory. They end up obviously winning game 6 in a blowout. But you look at those games, here's another fourth quarter game. Game 6 against the Detroit Pistons, battle back and forth. It's about who comes up on top and who finishes well and who finishes the best, who finishes on top, who's closing out games. Is Jalen Brunson making the clutch shots? Are the Knicks setting him up for success? And what we know is obviously we want a system that moves the ball incredibly well. And that's what Mike Brown preaches and praises. But this is playoff basketball. When it comes down to the final 5 minutes, it's slow. It's isolation. So you're looking for your best player in Jalen Brunson to close out these games, especially he's had very much success against the Atlanta Hawks before, and especially Dyson Daniels. So you're looking for your captain to close out these games.
Yeah, and that's going to be huge, especially because look, a lot of people have been. And now that you bring up Brunson, I really want to talk about this because a lot of people have been like worried about if Brunson's kind of dropping off a little bit production wise because his points per game total went trickled slightly down, very slightly. He still averaged 26 a game on great efficiency, I should point out. But some people were pointing out some of the that little stretch he had in March where he was kind of like not the most efficient and he wasn't doing the best scoring, but I thought he was still impacting a lot of winning because he was moving the ball more. He was having some big assist numbers, he was playmaking at a much higher rate. And this is what I don't understand. I really want to hear what you guys say about this. A lot of fans have been saying, oh, Jalen Brunson needs to pass the ball more. Jalen Brunson is a ball hog, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then he starts passing the ball more, and it's now, oh, well, Jalen Brunson is not the same player now as he was before. He's not scoring as good as he was before. What version of Brunson do you guys want? That's what I want to know. Like, what version do you want? Me personally, I don't really care which version we're getting, if it's the playmaking version or the scoring version, if we're winning games. I think Brunson has still impacted winning in a variety of ways, and I think that's what makes him so great, is that he's able to play winning basketball in more ways than just simply putting up 40 points or putting up 30 points. He's showing that he can also put in high assist numbers, get the rest of the guys involved, and still win games. And I think you could even argue this too, that getting the other guys involved is equally, if not more important than Brunson dropping 40. Because if you're getting the other guys involved, you're getting them in rhythm, you're getting them hot, you're making other teams have to pay attention to them and keep them on their toes. Because if Brunson's just doing everything, he's going to eventually get double teamed. And then the double team is going to happen, and then he's going to give it to somebody else, and that other player does not know what to do with it, or they're ice cold and they're going to end up missing the shot. So, Luca, what I want to really hear from you about this really is just kind of what you think about that. Like, do you think Brunson has quote unquote dropped off in production, or do you think he's just playing a different brand of basketball that's trying to impact winning more?
No, I don't think he's playing a different brand of basketball. I know people are concerned about the ankle a little bit, but I agree with you, Dylan, about the whole lack of consistency when it comes to Brunson's. When people are viewing Brunson, this is not everybody. This is obviously some people, or some fans at least, where they say, as you said, oh, he's passing the ball too much, or he's too passive, or he's way too aggressive, and he's a ball hog. As you said, distributing the ball is probably just as important, not if not more, than getting into isolation and scoring. Because we all know Brunson to be a score for first point guard. There's no denial about it. But you know what? We need to save Brunson a little bit in terms of his energy and in terms of his stamina. If another guy like Cat or Mikal Bridges or OG is going off, you feed him the rock and you feed the hot hand. That's the basic game of basketball. That's how we know it. But at the end of the day, if Brunson needs to get this team a bucket and they're desperate, that's what it's gonna be about.
Someone just said this in the Instagram too. He said everyone says that everyone's better than Jalen Brunson until it's time to be better than Jalen Brunson, and I
That's
love
very
that.
true. That's very true, especially with the crap talk. What was it? Colin Cowherd
Colin
saying the
Cowherd
other
said
day.
that he's a number 3 option on a great team, which I think is a load of crap. I
That's
think that's just a terrible take.
it's a fallacy. It's absolute sophistry. But regardless, moving the discussion back to Brunson, him moving the ball is going to help him out a lot. Obviously, it creates for others, and it's going to take a lot of pressure on him. You don't need this being a postseason. or just a series where everything is on him and nobody else is performing. So, and that's not what the system that Mike Brown has brought in was about. It's not about, oh, we're just going to maximize Jalen Brunson. We're going to help Jalen Brunson by maximizing our other teammates, and by maximizing his teammates, we're going to maximize Brunson, get him some hope and looks, hopefully. So, hopefully, Mike Brown has got something cooking.
Yeah, and now that you bring up Mike Brown, I want to pivot a little bit to Mike Brown for this conversation about the playoffs here. Um, Obviously, as I said earlier, I thought he did pretty good in the regular season. I thought he did a very solid job given the expectations. Do I think he had a perfect regular season? Absolutely not. You can look at the 2-9 stretch as a big reason why I don't believe so. But you look at all the other metrics, and it would suggest that Mike Brown was, outstanding in his first year with the team. And I do think, just given the expectations that was placed on him, the fact that he's inheriting basically a Tibbs roster and all that stuff, I thought he did a pretty solid job. But obviously, no one's going to really care how he did in the regular season if they fall short in the playoffs. So, really, the way I'm looking at Mike Brown this postseason is, I want to see more Jalen Brunson and Cat in the pick and roll, and I know they started to do it a lot more towards the end of the season, and some fans were theorizing that maybe Mike Brown was hiding that until the very end, so the teams don't game plan on it. That could be true. I can't confirm or deny that theory though. Maybe they just decided not to do it. Maybe they were trying other strategies out and then decided late in the season, let's just try out this pick and roll, see how it works, and realize it's actually unstoppable and you can just spam it over and over and over like it's 2K. Um, but when I aside from all that stuff, I want to see more pick and rolls and stuff, but I also want to see Mike Brown handle the rotations properly. And I think the rotations is a good discussion point for us to have right now, because when you look at the playoff rotation right now, we pretty much know what it's going to look like because we kind of saw it against the Celtics and the Hawks at the end of the season. It's going to be, your typical starting five. Don't need to name all those guys. We know who it is. And then off the bench, it's going to be McBride, Shamet, Clarkson, and Mitchell Robinson. And me personally, I think that's fine. I think that is a good rotation. I think those guys have earned their spot to earn those minutes. Some people have suggested maybe Jose Alvarado should be playing or Mohamed Diawara should be playing. And Luca, I want to hear what you think about that. Do you think that's like the right rotation? Do you think, and not even just that, but do you also think there's a certain way the bench minutes should be managed compared to last year? Because last year we didn't see really much of the bench, if at all, outside of McBride and Robinson.
Absolutely not. For the rotation, I do agree with the 9, but I also think the Knicks could use another ball handler. Yes, they do have Jordan Clarkson as essentially the second point guard, backup point guard, so to say. I don't view him as a point guard. I think he and, interestingly enough, him and Mitchell Robinson have a very nice chemistry. Jordan Clarkson has definitely earned his rotation spot. Earlier in the year, or I say even midway through the year, you would have said, I don't know, Jordan Clarkson is very hot and cold. That's relatively his style of play, where he's going to get you where there's going to be nights where he's going to score, 10, 15, however many off the bench, and then he's going to score 0. But what's the more surprising part about Clarkson is his defense. He was never a good defender before this little stretch run that he
It's
had.
why
And he
he's
started
earned his
playing
minutes
so
back.
physical. Yeah, he started playing so physical, started playing so aggressive. It's like, okay, this guy really is earning his keep, so he does deserve a spot in the rotation. And I think when it comes down to it, you saw in game 1 last year where the Knicks needed buckets, Cam Payne was there. And I think he's going to serve to the same effect, if not better, than Cam Payne did last year for the Knicks. I do, obviously, Shamet's the rotation, McBride's in the rotation, Mitchell Robinson in the rotation. I would add another player possibly. For me, there's me and my buddy Donald have been talking about this. I think there's 3 players that I would keep. I call it rotation fluid. I would handle that by a game scenario. Doesn't mean that they have to play, but if they need to play based on what's going on in the game, I'm calling them up. Diawara is definitely one. I think he could really help out defensively, just being a bruising body. His length is insane. I think he'll also help out with the spacing aspect. Alvarado, I think playing high press on some of Atlanta's guards would definitely be a special feature. Also, his passing as well. Obviously, really hasn't shot the ball well. And also, if Alvarado isn't working, I'd consider looking at Tyler Kolek. But again, I'm using these guys as, okay, if we're not, if said situation, like if the Knicks are not moving the ball enough, I'm calling Kolek, or Alvarado off the bench. If the Knicks are lacking size, I'm calling Diawara off the bench. If the Knicks need spacing, I'm calling Diawara or Alvarado off the bench. So it's going to be a game by game scenario. As I said, I do like the 9, but I would like an actual backup point guard. Maybe that's just me being a little traditional.
I mean, I get that because we in theory, I guess, don't have a real backup point guard, like a true point guard off the bench with McBride, Clarkson, because those guys are more like shooting guards, or at least that's what they've always been. Um, but I still think the way they have it designed is fine because I still think those are your top 9, and I think you should be playing your top 9 in the playoffs. But I do agree that to an extent that let's say you're not moving the ball enough. Yeah, maybe we could see some Alvarado minutes because Alvarado does have playoff experience. Not a lot of playoff experience, but he does. He has played in the playoffs before with the New Orleans Pelicans, and he's made an impact there as well. So there is something there with that. I think the problem I personally have with throwing guys like Kolek or Diawara into the rotation in the playoffs is two things. One, their lack of experience, obviously, one for the playoffs, but two, just their fluidity in the rotation. I don't really know if you can really just throw them into the fire in a playoff game and tell them, hey, do something for us, please. Like I don't think this is like a DeLon Wright thing, like where last year they were able to just throw DeLon Wright into the game and he ended up making an impact because DeLon Wright was a longtime veteran, been around for a minute. That's a little different circumstance. Kolek and Diawara though are still very much inexperienced. They're first and second year players. They didn't Kolek did not play like at all in the playoffs last year. Diawara obviously is a rookie this year. I personally think the problem with throwing them into it is going to just be like the idea of throwing them in would sound better, but then they'd actually be out there, and I don't think it would go as well just because of the lack of experience. And as I just mentioned, the fluidity, the volatility of them being in the rotation, kind of going in and out, not really having consistent minutes. Now, granted, I think the coaching staff has done a good job at making sure the guys stay ready. I think they've done a fantastic job at that. You can look at Jordan Clarkson as a great example, a guy who didn't play for basically 2 months, basically was out of the rotation entirely for nearly 2 whole months, came back in and earned his spot back. It became, as you mentioned, became a better defender, started scoring better, became a more versatile scorer, became a better offensive rebounder at that as well. Given the fact that he's only like 6'5", doing that is phenomenal. I like the hustle. So, um, yeah, there's a chance that those guys could come in and make an impact immediately if their number is called. Someone else just mentioned this as well in the Instagram comments. Someone brought up Jeremy Sohan just now. They said Jeremy Sohan could be a defensive stopper if he's needed to be a defensive stopper. And the way I see it with Sohan is he could, but at the same time, it kind of goes along with like Diawara and Kolek, just the volatility of the rotation, the fact that they were always in and out. It just I don't know what they're going to provide. And I personally don't like having players out there that I don't know what they're going to give me. Like Mikal Bridges, for example, is a big player that I've highlighted several times about how he's someone I don't know what I'm going to get. He is a guy who, every single time, I feel like more often than not, you just don't know which version of him you're going to get when he's out there. You don't know if you're going to get, a smooth 15 points on solid efficiency with a couple steals, maybe a block here and there, or if you're getting 8 points on 3 of 13 shooting and bad defense. You don't know which version of him you're going to get on a nightly basis. Like OG, for example, is somebody who most nights, 9 times out of 10, he will be your best defender. Maybe he won't always be on offensively, but he's going to be your best defender. Jalen Brunson, he's going to score a lot. He's going to be taking a lot of shots. He'll try to move the ball. Josh Hart, he's going to rebound. He's going to move the ball. Cat, he's going to get a lot of rebounds at the very least. I think offensively, Cat, we still kind of are on the fence with a little bit, but he's going to get a lot of rebounds. Mikal is somebody you have no idea what you're going to get. And to kind of tie it back to my rotation point here, it's like, I don't want to have guys out there where I'm like, okay, are they going to look good? Are they going to, go out there, play 5 minutes and look awful? Or what? That's something that worries me because I get throwing other bodies out there to kind of give teams a different look, but again, I don't like the unknown. The unknown is one of the things that I hate the most. I like knowing and feeling confident about what my team is going to provide and what the players on the floor are going to provide. What do you think about all that? I want to hear what you guys say about that.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I do understand the points regarding Kolek and Diawara and Sohan. I think Sohan would be a bit of a long shot, in my personal opinion, if any player were to get put into the game. And I want to pick your brain on this because a few people mentioned on Twitter, Do you think the Knicks are kind of hiding Mo Diawara a little bit for the sake of his restricted free agency? I know it's an off-season
A
question.
lot of people have been bringing that up, and I'm glad you did. I really want to say no, that they're not doing that, just because I think the theory of doing that is like, I think people in that regard overrate DOR, saying like, why we got to, like, hiding this kid. I get he's a restricted free agent and teams might want to pick him up, but um I don't think they're necessarily hiding him, because I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think you should be hiding him. If he is providing an impact to a title contender, you should be using him to your advantage. If he gets picked up by a different team, if a team overpays for him or whatever, then so be it. Me personally, I don't think they're hiding him. I think that the way they're using him is just they're trying to develop him as a rookie. They're not trying to throw him out there for so many minutes. I like, because granted, the first half of the year he barely saw the court, and then he started playing a little bit more and was playing well. But then he did have some rookie lapses. He did actually have some moments where I went, okay, now he actually looks like a rookie. He doesn't look like the 6 year veteran that I always called him, because I said he always played like a 6 year veteran. Because, I mean, how often do you see a late second rounder have that much poise and that much confidence as a rookie? You don't see that, right? But then he started to have those rookie moments a little bit, and then he kind of lost his minutes. He lost his rotation spot, kind of fell to a victim of the numbers game with the additions of Alvarado and then McBride coming back. You kind of just lose your spot at that point. So I don't necessarily think they're hiding DOR. I think it's more so that he's still developing. They Parts of his game have been kind of, I guess, quote unquote exposed, because I do think there's still some parts of his game that you can look at and go, okay, yeah, he needs to develop that, such as his finishing, for example. And I think lately on defense he was fouling a little bit too much as well, despite being a pretty solid defender for a rookie. He was fouling a little bit too much later on in the year. The more times he was getting those minutes, and as I just mentioned, the finishing still needs some work. You can even say the shooting outside of the corners needs some work too. Obviously, the corners, he's phenomenal. He's like above 40%, close to 50% from the quarters from the corners. That's like unreal for a guy that size. But yeah, to kind of wrap up my point there, I think it's more so just he's developing. He's a rookie, so I don't think they're hiding him. But what do you think about that? I want to hear what you guys think.
I say it's a possibility, but I think we saw his minutes. It's not like we saw his minutes lessen out of nowhere. I think as soon as they got Landry Shamet and Deuce McBride back to pure health, that the Knicks went with a different look. Now, obviously, when he was hot, Diawara, as you said, he was surreal from the corners. He was good defensively. He was a bit of a playmaker, could drive to the rim, been uncontrolled, been uncanny. So obviously that's something he has to work on. But I'm like 50-50 on it. If he was really being hidden, we would have seen him playing with guys like Deuce McBride and Landry Shamet just for a little bit. But once they came back, I felt it was just like, okay, they really don't need. I shouldn't say they really didn't need him, but it was like, okay, his rotation spot was taken already, and this is the playoffs, right? You're not relying on your rotation to be 12 deep. You're relying at least 9, 10 deep at this point. And it's obviously more expensive than it was last year, where it was what, 7-man rotation, 8-man rotation at most for the Knicks. Now they can go 9, 10, 11, 12 deep if they want, but I think they're going to stick with 9 or 10.
And they should stick with 9. I've seen some people suggest, and this is not a overwhelming majority of people, but some people have suggested to run a deeper rotation, such as 11 or 12 players, because of the extra bodies that we just mentioned, kind of Indiana Pacers style. And what I said to that is, well, we don't have necessarily the talent level of all these guys to run 11 or 12 players. And I think also the issue, aside from the talent, is they have too many guards. You're not going to run. If I see a lineup out there of Alvarado, Kolek, and Deuce together, I'm gonna lose my mind, because I'm sorry, that's three very small guards that you're playing next to one another, and really that's three play styles that I don't think mesh. Right? Obviously, we're not going to see that. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical here, for the people that want to run a deeper rotation. And for what it's worth, that Pacers team last year, that was one. It was a deep squad, but also Rick Carlisle was also kind of just throwing things out there, because he had the game plan on the Knicks. He knew that if you just run them off the floor, you're gonna win games. And look, the Pacers outran the Knicks badly. I mean, they really did. That's how they won game one. That's how they ended up, taking control of the series. Really, they had a grip on that series the entire time. It's a matter of just being straight up outcoached. So the way I see it, they don't need to run more than 9 guys, really. I think the rotations we saw in Atlanta and against Boston to end the season, those two games right there, that's the rotation we're going to see. And clearly, evidenced by the two victories, it can work. It can work to win games. Game one, I think, will be interesting because I think in game one we'll see a defined rotation of 9 guys, but maybe there's a greater chance in game one that we will see perhaps 2 minutes of Alvarado or 2 minutes of Diawara early in the late in the first quarter or something like that. Maybe there is a chance we see that, but overall we're not gonna see them much at all, if at all. We won't really see them. We're gonna see the top 9 that we've been talking about, and if injuries rise up or if someone gets hurt or whatever may happen, then maybe we'll see a different body out there. Now, Luca, for the last discussion point I want to talk about today on this stream is the starting five, because the starting five I think we know is going to remain the same. I think we can at least agree on that point that it'll definitely remain the same. But is it a good idea? I've seen a lot of people suggesting Mitchell Robinson should start, and I personally think the double big lineup is the Knicks' best lineup. And I've said that we will see a lot of the double big lineup in the playoffs, which we definitely will. We'll be seeing that a lot throughout the postseason, but we may not necessarily see it start. And I want to know from your perspective here, do you think that they should change the starting lineup from what it currently is, or do you think they're just going to roll with it? And do you think that's a good idea?
I think they are going to roll with the current starting lineup as constituted, but I do think that the double big lineup, as you said, is going to be used a little more often. Now, you might not see it like Brunson, Bridges, Anunoby, Towns, and Mitch. No, you might see lineups where you have like a Clarkson, maybe a guard or two, and Towns and Mitch together. You're probably going to see that combination a lot more. And the Knicks, and once again, as we mentioned, have that rebounding advantage. They have that size advantage on the boards compared to the Atlanta Hawks. Obviously, Onyeka Okongwu was good in his own right, but not compared to Karl Anthony Towns and Mitch on the boards, especially Josh Hart. Imagine playing Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson, and Karl Anthony Towns together. Now, thinking of those two things, I should say two players with Towns and not Towns, Robinson and Josh Hart. Now, it's not great for spacing aspect, but for the rebound aspect and pushing in transition, playing a little fast, I think that would really get the Hawks that would keep the Hawks on their toes. But my personal favorite lineup would be the Knicks rolling with Deuce McBride at the 2 and Brunson at the 1. I think you could definitely. I think that's great for spacing aspect, and I also think that's good for. I think that's just good for a defensive aspect as well. Now, do I think they'll roll with that lineup? Not exactly. As I said, that's been my favorite lineup throughout the season. I think it's been underutilized. Same thing with the double big lineup. But I think if I were to debate the two, the double big lineup will definitely be used more often. Um, Maybe just not without Jalen. Maybe sometimes with Jalen Brunson, maybe sometimes without. So maybe as you were talking about the rotations and how they'll be constituted, maybe it's a thing where they stagger Towns and Brunson, and then they have Towns with Mitch when they stagger Towns and decide to leave Brunson on the bench. Here's another thing: those non-Brunson minutes are going to be pivotal. It is going to be pivotal to see what the Knicks do without Jalen Brunson.
Oh, 100%. The non-Brunson minutes are going to be super super important. I like very very important. The way I see it, me and Luca did a lot of streams during last season, and we did some earlier this year as well over on his channel at Knickscast. So by the way, if you guys do not already subscribe to his channel, please go subscribe to his YouTube channel Knickscast and follow him on Twitter as well. He does amazing work there. But anyways, we did streams a lot, throughout last year, and even in the offseason, and we were discussing the starting five before the year, and I said initially that Josh Hart starting was fine. I also said Mitchell Robinson should start, but then I kind of changed my tune on it a little bit after the Knicks played well with Hart in the starting lineup. You have always been riding with Deuce McBride starting, and the way I see it, I think he would have been starting by now if he didn't get injured. If he did not get
Mhm.
hurt and miss 2 months of the season, I think he would have been starting because um, Josh Hart obviously Josh Hart isn't like the sole issue with the starting five, but I think we can agree that I wouldn't say inability, but his hesitancy to shoot
Mhm.
was hurting the spacing significantly, like a lot, right? So with that in mind, in theory you go, okay, well let's just sub out Hart for a guy who actually wants to shoot. I heard Landry Shamet was also a name that was being discussed actually by the Knicks, by the coaching staff, that they were actually discussing potentially throwing Shamet in the starting five. And Shamet did start a handful of games this year, and he played well. So with the way I see it, I think right now they're gonna keep Hart in the starting five, and I think that's fine, just because you don't want to ruin the continuity of that starting five. Well, whether it's lack of continuity or whatever you want to call it. The point is they've played together a lot. They had the third most minutes together, played together in the league this year out of any five-man lineup. So that starting five knows how to play with one another, or at least you would like to think they know how to play with one another. Um, so they won't throw the continuity off with that. But we will definitely be seeing probably a good amount of Deuce McBride with some of the starters. I do expect to see that. And I also expect to see the double big a lot. I actually think the double big lineup will be their second most used lineup, if it's not the starting lineup, in the playoffs. I really do, because we saw how great the double big lineup works. It really does. You felt like at the early part of the year when they were starting it, because that was their starting five at the start of the year, you felt like that it did work because they were winning games, but at the same time, you also felt like it kind of was limiting Karl Anthony Towns a little bit, his offensive abilities. Because when Towns actually has a center on him, he does so much better. He does so much better when he's got a big man on him versus a wing. Towns is one of the most gifted big men really ever in this league. You don't see many 7-footers with an offensive skill set that he's got. So with that in mind, I get kind of why they went away from the double big lineup, but I also kind of wish they used it more during the season as opposed to, kind of throwing it back up here again late. I guess it's better late than never, but that's kind of my 2 cents on that. I think really the starting five will remain the same though, and I'll be fine with it. I just hope that if it starts to really struggle, that Mike Brown doesn't do what Tibbs did and wait too long to make a change. I hope Mike Brown is ready to make adjustments on the fly, um, if needed. And that's something I'm going to really be evaluating with him throughout this postseason is how will Mike Brown adjust to certain different game plans and schemes that are being thrown at by other teams. How will he make an adjustment? Will he throw in a lineup of more shooters more often? Will bring in more rebounding. Against Atlanta, I think you need to take advantage of the fact that Atlanta is going to be undersized, that they're not going to have as big of a center room as, the Knicks do. The Knicks have arguably the best center room, arguably in the playoffs with Cat and Mitch together. Obviously, not saying Cat is the best center out of all the playoff teams, but, when you look at the starting center and the backup center, you could argue it's one of the best, if not the best, big man room. So I'm hoping the Knicks take advantage of that. But anyways, Luca, kind of just to wrap things up, looking ahead to game one, give me a score prediction. Give me who's gonna win, and I just want to hear what you think's gonna go down in that game to kind of wrap things up here.
I think the Knicks take game one. I'm gonna go 114-107. It's gonna be a close game till the bitter end. It's gonna be. I don't want to say it's gonna be a shootout, but it's gonna be a match of constant punches being thrown at each other. It's about who responds first, who stands at the end of the match. Um, so I think the Knicks are going to win game one, 114-107, as they mentioned, but there's going to be a lot there's going to be it's going to be tough. This series is going to be tough, as I said, and I think the Knicks win in 6, but the Hawks definitely have a lot of they play with a lot of poise. As I said, Nikhil Alexander-Walker and Jalen Johnson are on the rise. You said they're MIP candidates, which I agree with. Um, very
I think
curious.
Alexander Walker is gonna win MIP at that too.
I think so too. And I'm very curious because a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, there's people that say, hey, listen, Mike Brown did a good job, as we have mentioned on here. It's going to be about what he does in the playoffs. And if he starts out game one and he craps the bed, a lot of fans aren't going to be happy and with cause. But if he starts out really well and he's really out scheming Quinn Snyder, who's a very damn good coach, that's going to give a lot like Knicks fans a lot of hope and something to build off of hope wise.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it's going to be a tough series, but I'm looking forward to it. I think this is going to be a fun series. I know a lot of people wanted the Toronto Raptors and were pretty upset that we were given the Atlanta Hawks because, well, the Orlando Magic somehow lost to a Ron Harper Jr., Luka Garza, and Baylor Shireman led Boston Celtics team, which is one of the worst losses I've seen a quote unquote playoff team ever take in the regular season, given the circumstances for Orlando that night. But, anyways, guys, I do think this is a good place to wrap things up. Please make sure you guys go subscribe and follow Knickscast, my good boy buddy Luca here on Twitter, and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. He does amazing work there. We've done a lot of collaborations on his channel in the past, and it was a good time to get him on here on Fireside Knicks as well. Make sure you guys also follow Fireside Knicks on all of our platforms. We're almost at 40,000 followers on Instagram. We are very, very close. I would love to hit it before the playoffs. If not, I would love to hit it during the playoffs. So please help us get there. You guys have been awesome with the support this year. Collabs like this cannot happen without your guys' support. So I really do, in fact, appreciate that a ton. You can also follow me on Twitter. It's at Dylan Backer ESM. For Instagram folks, it's at Dylan Backer ESM. I'm also on Instagram there, same name, at Dylan Backer ESM. And we will definitely be providing more streams throughout the postseason. Probably be doing a lot of post-game streams. Right after game one, I do plan to go live as well. We'll try to get Luca back on here a couple times as well. Love working with you and love working with a bunch of other creators that I've also gotten in touch with. We'll also get Johnny back on these streams for the Fireside Knicks folks. We'll also get Johnny back on these streams very soon during the postseason as well. Been an amazing addition to the FSK team this year, so I'm very much looking forward to having him back on the program. But Luca, thank you so much for joining me. For the rest of you guys, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you guys in the next stream. Peace out, and let's go Knicks.